Do one opening quick shot here. New study. This is the second time. Apparently, we have a deadline on this one, so they wanted to mention one more time. A new study looks to prove that eating cheese before bed can cause nightmares. The study undertaken by Sleep Junkie is looking for 5 American testers to slice their way through several types of cheeses every week, asking for participants to record their dreams and their nightmares. So if you would like this job, all you got to do is contact them. Sleep Junkie is sweetening the deal by giving their dairy dreamers $1,000 upon completion of the study. According to the website, applicants must be over 21 years old, own a smartwatch or fitness tracker, sleep by themselves, have a consistent sleep schedule, not suffer from any sleep-related issues, and probably most importantly, not to be dairy or lactose intolerant. The study is expected to take place between March and May of next year.
If you eat too much cheese before bed, you will be sleeping alone.
Well, that's one of the things that they want to track and make sure. I'm not sure if this has anything to do with like cows and.
What importance is this?
The study looks to prove that eating cheese before bed can cause nightmares.
What if it does? Why are we spending money on this?
Well, here's the other part of this, and I'm not going to bring the good esteemed senator into this, but wouldn't it matter the kind of cheese? And that variety is, I mean, Daniel, you got a lot of difference between Gouda, goat cheese, extra sharp, mozzarella. Does it really mean what type of nightmares you might have?
I should go get my wife for this segment because I said to her more than once, I just hope you love me as much as you love cheese. She is the cheese expert in our home, but if you need some people to do this study, I think you go to any college campus and say, we're going to put it on late night pizza, and then you report back to us. I could handle it if it was on pizza.
That's a very good idea. Plus, what kind of nightmares are we talking about? Like having an Italian grandmother stab you or something? What's the kind of nightmares? But apparently they're going to pay $1,000 for a group of people to do this. So that's a check. I'm not sure that's going to be listed at the Mississippi Employment Security Commission, but you can check. How are you, sir? It's good to have you.
I'm well. Thank you, Paul.
Man, let's get into this because we have a lot of things going on. When we had the good chairman Charles Busby with me earlier this week, one of the other things not related to the EV but related to the autonomous issue that's working its way through the House and Senate, he said he would probably not let it out of committee yesterday. He made today, I think they meet 11 o'clock this morning. There were some things that they had to work on as far as that is concerned. I'm not sure if you're in the loop on that one. It's not in your committee, is it?
No, it's not. I am familiar somewhat with it just, because it's on the trucking side of the industry is one of the big areas they're looking at. It's amazing what they can do with technology today, and it's always interesting to listen. But, of course, safety is probably the number one key there when we're saying nobody's driving that car.
And I mentioned this to him. I take a little comfort in knowing with all the lawyers around that a trucking company is not going to risk themselves unless this thing is just absolutely dead on from having a massive wreck and massive lawsuit. So I hope that plays into it. Let's get to the EV deal because this has really divided the people in the state. The more aware you are of this, the more that I see on social media platforms, people not in line with what the Republicans in the House and Senate are probably going to do and pass this bill.
Well, and I think that's fair, and you may be aware, and for full disclosure, I actually dropped the companion bill on the Senate side. So House Bill 401.
What does it say? How different is it?
It's very similar. This is a bill we did last year, and I'm glad to discuss it and take the questions. Last year we went through this process, and I will say, for Chairman Harkins in Finance, I think he's tried to listen to every side. He has really spent a lot of time with this, and we've all tried to be good with the bill. A couple of things it doesn't do, and I've read, some of my friends have written the articles. It does not prohibit sales. So every time somebody wants to write that in an article, it simply does not prohibit online sales. If somebody can help me find that in the text, that'd be great. But people have been buying cars online. They've been taking delivery here in the state of Mississippi. And there is no intent to prevent any company from selling vehicles directly in the state of Mississippi if they choose not to use a dealership model. And that's how all this got started, because companies said, we don't want to have brick and mortar stores. We want to sell direct to customer like Amazon. Okay, no problem. And they were doing that. Then they decided they wanted dealerships, but they wanted to call them something else. But basically, it was a dealership, and no one has a problem with them having dealerships. It's just simply you have to follow the franchise laws that all the other manufacturers in this state and dealers in this state have to follow. Also, there's no prohibition against service centers. You can build 50 service centers or 500.
Okay, hang on. So what does it prohibit? And there are two bills, aren't they?
Well, now 401, if that's what we're talking about, it's one bill. It is basically saying we're not going to have two sets of rules in this industry, and we're not going to have a set of rules for EVs and a separate set of rules for internal combustible engines. And I had this conversation the other day with one of these companies, with some of their folks, and I said, there's no negative EV issue here, but you want a separate set of rules. But you're in the car business. You're not building spaceships. It's just a different propulsion model. Hydrogen fusion may be around the corner. That's not the issue. The issue is that since 1970, the law on the books has been if you're going to sell new cars through a dealership, you have to follow the franchise laws, and that's all we are reasserting, because one of the companies.
But you're confusing everybody now, because what does the franchise law? Does it dictate that they have bricks and mortar in the state?
It does not dictate that they have to have bricks and mortar.
All right. So what does it dictate? How does this put any on the buyer out there? You just mentioned a few seconds ago, for the buyer himself or herself, it really is immaterial. It doesn't matter, because they can still order, but they can't order from the factory. They have to order from someone else, or what?
No, if the model is they want to go online and they want to look at this, they want to order it here to their location, to this state.
From anywhere, directly from Tesla, or
that's
directly
correct.
from a.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's no prohibition against that. The difference is these companies said, well, not only would we like to do that, we would like to put in storefronts. We would like to go down to, some location and sell. Well, that's fine. You can do that too, but you have to follow the same set of rules that the other traditional manufacturers have to follow. In the state of Mississippi, if you sell new cars, you have what's called a dealer license. There's a arm's length distance between the manufacturer and the actual franchisee, the dealership, and that's what's been the law since 1970. And if people want to order a car directly from a manufacturer and not have a local dealer to go rely on, because a lot of times when you buy a car, you look at model, you look at style, you look at price, but you also look at that dealership to say, well, here's where I'm going to have my service done, or here's who I'm going to come see if there's a problem with this vehicle. Occasionally, you buy a vehicle and maybe there's some issues with it. But if a customer wants to just buy it online and not have that level of comfort, that's fine. They can do that. That's a free choice of theirs.
So where are the existing car dealers threatened from what is now anyone who wants to go online and buy directly from a manufacturer?
I don't think they're threatened by the fact that somebody wants to go online and buy from a manufacturer. That's no one is objected to that. That's been kind of the false narrative that's been out there. Here's what is objected to. You take a traditional manufacturer that's been around for years, and they begin to carve out of their line of cars electric vehicles and say, because electric vehicles have a different set of rules, now traditional dealership, you don't get to sell this vehicle you've been selling unless you spend a bunch of money for our e-program. And I actually said that on one of these meetings. I don't want to be flippant about this. I have traveled to multiple meetings, regional, tri-state, as it relates to the auto dealer, trying to understand the issues, and also sat in the Motor Vehicle Commission and listened to one of these legacy manufacturers discuss what the dealerships across this nation would have to do to continue to sell their electric vehicles. That's the problem. They see an opportunity to say, we're going to carve out electric vehicles and take them away from you unless you spend this money to beef up our charging system. So that's the issue. It's not an anti-EV issue. It is hey, we've got to set a law on the books. And if we make a different set for electric vehicles, you're playing by two sets of rules.
We're going to continue this on the other side of it. But I'm also thinking about this as society, as the culture continues to move on. A greater and greater percentage of what is on the lots of the GM dealer, the Ford dealer, Chrysler, etc., will be EV vehicles.
That's correct. That's exactly a great point. Nobody's against selling EV vehicles. You can't have two sets of rules for two cars.
And if Joe Biden is reelected, that may happen next year. You never know. So we'll talk more about that coming up next. FDIC. Daniel Sparks. Senator Sparks, District 5 in the House, Vice Chairman also of Senate Corrections. And one of the, I was just thinking about this during the break here, Daniel, that we have a team of people that are just incredible. They're above my pay grade as far as intelligence. Also, they're the digital team that do the geofencing and everything. And I mean that SuperTalk digital team is just incredible. Some of the brightest professionals. And they put together these things for car dealerships, along with our targeted audiences, all the targeted audiences. And it just blows my mind how they do this. And then they back it with radio and TV, SuperTalk Radio, SuperTalk TV. And the results are just incredible. But within this concept, you will find out how many people in this state get internet buys from out-of-state people coming in. So they are also doing this. I mean, it's if you don't deal on the internet basis and do it with all of the technology that's available in car dealerships today, you can't survive. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a different world than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Sure, it is, and that's something that we've discussed, and I think this is an ongoing situation. It's very interesting that you brought up geofencing, because one of the legacy manufacturer that I was listening to them present to the Motor Vehicle Commission basically told their dealerships that if you don't participate in our charging program, that if you do not put in these superchargers, public-facing, available chargers, spend a significant amount of money, they're going to be geofenced out of that particular manufacturer's buy list. So in other words, I'm from Belmont, Mississippi, and if I had a dealership in Belmont, but I didn't ante up to get into this electric program, they would send people to the next closest dealership that did if they went online nationally to look at this manufacturer's vehicle. So yeah, you're exactly right. The geofencing is real, and that's why this is something that, right now, and we're in a developing market for technology. But like I said earlier, this is still a car, whether it's an electric propulsion or not. And the other thing that goes into it, I've heard a lot of my friends talk about, aren't Republicans for free market? I think that's a little hypocritical when you look at what's happened in the electric vehicle world. They have been subsidized probably more than any group I can imagine recently. While at the same time, the cost of fuel has gone through the roof, once again, because of federal policy primarily. And so when they say, this is a free market decision by the consumer, I say no, that's not actually true. And the fact is, just recently, one of these EV companies dropped their prices enough to qualify for the Biden $7,500 rebate. Which, again, is tax dollars that are motivating you to buy this car. And there's some people that have bought those cars in the last year or so who are pretty upset because of the price drop. They did it based on getting under the threshold to get to a $7,500 car. The other thing that we look at with these vehicles is, an automobile is probably the second most expensive purchase that you make as a family to your own personal home. Most people don't have the cash in their pocket to go buy one of these cars. You finance it. So this is an investment. It's a commitment. Now, me personally, I would rather have a relationship with a dealership that I could go down and say, hey, something's wrong with my car, and a warranty, et cetera. But now, like I said, I'm not going to take away the choice. If somebody wants to go online and buy a car and have it brought to Mississippi and go with it, great. That's good for you. But we just don't want two sets of rules.
It is a little bit unfair competition if it comes down to this. If you bought directly from the factory or whatever that happens to be, you put the dealer who has to have the bricks and mortar, has to have all the certificates, has to play by the rules, at about what I've heard 20% unfair competition. In other words, you could buy it offline or online somewhere and save 20% by not going through a dealer.
I haven't seen those numbers. I wouldn't dispute you on that. I just I know that again. And here's something else. This was up last year. I think you and I even had some of this discussion last year. Where's the bill? Because we've redropped a similar bill that what we had last year. Where's the bill from the other side that says, "Hey, here's our fix"? The truth is, we've worked all summer. I'm just, to be honest with you, trying to make sure we try to have the right tenor on this legislation and deal with it. And I don't see any bill from the other side. They're just saying the same things they said last year, which are not true, about prohibiting direct sales. There was, some information going around, it'll limit service centers. None of that stuff's true. It boils down to one set of rules for everybody. And if you want to sell direct to your customer online, you got the right to do that.
Just to clarify this, if this is passed, what will Tesla or any other EV company have to do to operate in the state of Mississippi? When you say play by the rules, just kind of paint that a little bit.
If somebody wants to have brick and mortar stores in the state of Mississippi and sell new vehicles, it's not about used vehicles, they have to enter into a franchise agreement with someone who is not owned by that manufacturer. They can choose who they want to partner with. They could technically go out and partner with existing dealerships if they wanted to. They could, bring in new people to have just a dealership for their particular vehicle, but they would just have to have a non-controlled party. That was the issue, is that we're just going to drop dealerships in, but we're the manufacturer also.
Because I do not know this answer to this one, and things have changed in the automobile business a lot over the years, as I mentioned earlier. Could a GM dealer have signed on to this, or is there something within the contract that they have with GM that they couldn't take on Tesla? Or anybody else?
I think that's a good question. A lot of those contracts are probably not for public consumption, but that's exactly my point, is if you wanted to contract out with a dealership that existed in a particular region, I would say that that's between the parties. They can do that now if a legacy manufacturer's contract with their dealership prohibited anybody else. But, over the years in my lifetime, I think I've seen some interesting signs where different cars were sold in different manners. But yes, I think that's a reasonable idea.
Well, the other thing too, and I'm not sure how this has changed, and I know people. I stopped trying to look at it when you saw a car vending machine. I couldn't follow it after that. But I mean, old school, and I'm not too sure that's still not the case with a lot of people. Old school, we want to test drive. We want to kick the tires. We want to know that if something breaks 2 days later or 2 months later or 2 years later, we got somebody who knows how to fix it. And I don't understand all of this deal about if you're going to buy a vehicle from somebody and you don't have any support afterwards, you're asking for trouble.
And I agree with you, but that's, like I said, that we're not taking that choice away from people. I personally wouldn't make that choice this time, but that choice is there if people want to do that. There's a big difference between me ordering an item off of Amazon and having it delivered to my house and going, gosh, I don't like that, versus buying a car.
Look, I'm not knocking Subaru at all. Please, if you dealers out there have Subaru, that's fine. But I know that the advertising on Subaru is, it's almost like if you want to treat the environment or dogs or whatever, and if you want to help them out, buy this vehicle. I thought, old school, I could see what my father would say about that one. We're going to buy a car, but it's not going to be because we're giving some money to dogs or anything else. So it's a different world out there. You are also vice chair of Senate Corrections. Don't want to let you go without talking about that for a second or two. Where are we as far as corrections are concerned? Any money coming in?
Well,
any bills out there talks about a new prison to replace some of Parchman?
I think there's a lot of discussions out there. One thing that is a fact is the Department of Corrections is asking for a large deficit appropriation. Their appropriation for next year would be significantly higher. We're continuing to spend more and more money in corrections. Some of that is needed. Some of that is probably something that prior maintenance was not done, and we're having to play catch up. But the biggest issue that we have, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is how are we utilizing our assets? If we look at, and I'm talking about physical assets, if we look at the facility at Parchment, if it costs more to maintain it and keep it up and cannot function versus what it would cost and be safe for inmates and correctional officers, et cetera, to have something else, that's a discussion we need to be having. But this just continual increase in price is not acceptable. There's inflationary factors obviously that come into play, but one of the things that I have a bill this time, and we can talk about that. But it's our county jails. We're housing about 900 to 1,000 inmates basically every day in our county jails because we're not getting them moved to MDOC fast enough. And
I want to give you the final say coming up in a moment or two. I know we also talked about this, that the two subjects to hit on the final segment here. The postpartum, which the Speaker made news yesterday by again saying that he's still not inclined to do that or even let it out of committee. So we'll talk about that. Also, the rebate versus maybe a possibility of decreasing some of the taxes on food purchases. Those two things when we come back, final segment with Senator Daniel Sparks right after this. And visit with Daniel Sparks. Turn that down a little bit. Thank you, sir, very much. The Speaker did tell, I think he told the Daily Journal yesterday, and he was yesterday or day before. He said, no, I'm not committing to anything, talking about postpartum. And so that seems to be a stalemate still in the House of Representatives. What's your thought as far as the Senate's concerned?
We've passed the bill probably the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's, once again, it goes back to an investment. What we have is a category of people who are not eligible for Medicaid, as I understand it, under the guidelines and the rules based on their income. Then that person, particularly, is an expectant mother, and they will go on to Medicaid because of the pregnancy, because of it's a different standard as far as income level goes. So these are working people who didn't qualify otherwise.
Do we know what the range of income happens to be to qualify for that?
I do. I apologize. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I want to say it's a percentage of poverty level, but I apologize. I don't know. But what has happened over the last couple of years, I believe, is under some of the federal regulation, federal law. We've covered them. We actually were supposed to be covering them. I don't know if there's some data that can be delivered by Medicaid. I know that I want to believe Texas has also potentially have done some things to show us some data. The goal is that, these are mothers who have young children. They have different health needs than, someone that has not carried a child to full term. And that this investment, that goes from 60 days to 12 months, is to prevent health care issues potentially to that mother, to that child, as they go back into the working world. And, it seems to be a reasonable investment based on the cost. And I think it's something that, that we've supported and we'll continue to support.
To the point, if there are some maladies that happen during this period and it transcends through later on in life, it's going to cost us more.
That's right.
We understand that. Or, God forbid, it adds to the, infant mortality rate.
That's right.
In the state of Mississippi. I always wonder this, and I ask this question, and I hear other states have made that decision to say, okay, this is going to cost us more money. We understand that. There's some federal dollars. We understand that. But could we not move it from 2 months to 6 months? And some people say, yeah, and some people just discount it altogether to find a happy medium there.
And I think that's something that certainly could be discussed. I don't think that we've had that compromise.
But that has never been discussed at all?
I don't think that has been discussed back at us. I'm not on Medicaid as far as a committee, but I have not, heard someone advocate for that position. The other thing in this is that there's an educational component too. One of the things that you don't want to have is another child too quickly, because that often causes the low birth weight babies. You end up in the NICU, and it also could potentially contribute to that infant mortality rate. So there's a piece of it too that's there to prevent an issue for that next child. That the mother who wants to have another child is in a better physical position to be able to do that for herself and for the child.
And I think a lot of us who have for decades and decades been just praying that we would get behind Roe versus Wade. Everybody was sitting on the front row pew here, Republicans and I'm not sure about how many Democrats, but certainly in Mississippi, as far as doing away with Roe versus Wade. And if we do have 5,000 births in the state of Mississippi or abortions on a yearly basis, then somewhere down the line that's going to be a sizable number of births that will not be going through abortion in our state. And as Christians and as responsible citizens, we got to take a look at, if this happens, how are they taken care of? I mean, it's one of those callings there that you said, all right, you prayed for it, now do something. You prayed for a good crop, you got to go harvest it.
That's exactly right. And, my colleague, Senator Nicole Boyd out of Oxford, Lieutenant Governor appointed her to see things just like this, actually made a special committee dealing with young children and what we can do. And she has gone across this country. There's no telling how many days she spent away from her home and her family trying to get educated on this. And she's going to bring some bills forward, and there are going to be some people that say, hey, I don't like that bill. That's okay. But she's put the time in. That's something that, we've sometimes forget. It's easy for me to sit back and naysay somebody's bill, but what time have you put in? What investment have you put in to educate yourself on the issue? And I'm going to pay attention to what she says, because she's put the time in, and others who are experts in that field. But I think you're 100% right on the principle that we have prayed and worked and politicked for the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and now we have a duty, I believe, to try to be supportive of what we've prayed for.
One of the things, and I think politicians can understand this, these are all data-driven, so somewhere down the line, much like the $80 million we want to give to rural hospitals without really fixing the root problems of this, those numbers are going to come up. If 6 months, 8 months from now, a year from now, all of a sudden they need 80 million more, 100 million more, some more closing, and I think the public has a right to come back and say, wait, we told you to fix the problems, and you poured $80 million into it.
100%.
And the numbers also on this one.
Well,
we saw the
right.
births of death mortality rate on these kids going up, so we gave you the figures. You didn't act.
Well, and you also got to look at, there were 4 pieces to that quickly. The $80 million is not just $80 million, and this is going to fix it. We're looking with the consolidation piece to say, hey, you've got to fix your own thing. We may help you as you move through it, but they've got to reanalyze.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.